This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'll be joined by Terry Arko of HASA. And we're going to do a series of podcasts here. In this first one, we're going to talk about drought restrictions and how much water a pool actually uses. Is a pool a big water waster? And I think this will come in handy when you're talking to customers who don't want to fill their pool because they feel like they're wasting water, or don't want to partially drain their pool because they feel like maybe they're going to get a penalty or get in trouble for that. So Terry kind of clarifies that in today's podcast. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So I'm joined today by Terry Arko of HASA. And how's everything, Terry?
Going great. I believe either today or tomorrow, I think it's the first day of summer, right?
Yeah,
I think tomorrow's the summer solstice.
Something like that, Saturday.
It's bread and butter season for the pool pro. Or maybe we should say meat and potatoes.
Yeah. Or we should say heat and more heat.
A lot of work.
Well, this week in Arizona, I think most of those areas, Phoenix, and they're at like 115, 120 already. So there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, well, that's tough on one end, but you also realize that that's the business that we're in. I know for all my time in the pool industry, and even working for chemical manufacturers, and sometimes I guess you would get those sort of unusually sort of cool seasons where it just seemed like the spring was holding on and so forth. And I know when I worked for the manufacturers, usually it was the CEOs and people like that would start to get nervous because cold weather not good for the pool industry. And I would always say, it's going to get hot. And when it gets hot, just buckle up, because once it gets hot, everybody's going to be working hard and chemicals are going to be needed.
I think that's true for most areas. Except for when I mentioned Arizona, they're always hot. I mean, in the summer, like beginning of April, they just get.
They seem to be the ones that kick everything off. Yeah.
I just had someone message me yesterday from Arizona saying, "What are some tips to keeping cool? It's 111 today." I'm like, well, I mean, you probably shouldn't be in Arizona.
Don't go outside. Right? Don't go outside, which is hard. And the thing about. God bless those guys over there. They're a tough bunch, and I give them credit because I know in the summer, a lot of those guys, they're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe even 3:30 in the morning. And they're getting out to their pools even before 5 to get as many pools done when it's cooler, what you probably have to do to survive there.
Pretty much. Yeah. But luckily in my area, 111 is very rare. So 105 is like typically the max, which is still unbearable out there.
Sure.
I couldn't imagine 120 for a week straight.
That's tough. But I guess I would say, you want to hydrate a lot. And, at HASA, we give out neck coolers.
Okay.
And I hopefully have good AC in your truck.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So since we're talking about Arizona, this kind of fits right in because we're talking today about drought and the pools. And are pools really water wasters, as people say. And this is a misconception. I think a lot of cities and municipalities come down on pools pretty fast because they have this conception that, or misconception, that the pool is a big consumer of water. So let's talk a little bit about how much water a pool actually uses and some things to know about in a drought situation.
Yeah, and I think this always comes up to this time of year, it seems like. And once we start to get into summer, once it gets warmer, once it gets drier and so forth, and then, a lot of times we sort of call it drought season too. And we'll see that all of a sudden certain areas, California, will always sort of declare a drought at some point, and then they want water conservation measures. It seems like the obvious thing that usually people go after are pools. They'll go after pools a lot because, I mean, you can imagine, I guess we know, like you've got a big reservoir of water in the pool, and there can be the misconception of, that, hey, that's a big water waster. And, the reason I was talking to you earlier about this too, and before the podcast, and I said, I felt like this is a good thing to address because I just recently read a book like on water. I read books on water all the time, but this was a water conservation book. And it was written from, more of sort of a climate reaction standpoint. And the thing that sort of alarmed me and made me want to talk about this was that the author of the book said he knew somebody who lived in Arizona, of all places, and that they felt like they needed to conserve water in Arizona, obviously, but their reaction or their means for conserving water was they had a swimming pool. And so they felt like that swimming pool was going to be a big waster of water. And I don't know if they prepared or if they did their research or whatever, but apparently they were kind of boasting that they had their pool removed and replaced it with artificial turf, and that was going to save on money and everything. And so when I see things like that, that really kind of being in the industry, as you yourself too, that concerns me because I think there's a lot of misconceptions on pools. One thing I would recommend to anybody, and particularly pool pros, and I know customers may bring this up, they may have concerns just when you're backwashing their pool in the middle of the summer when it's hot, and they may come out and they might feel like, hey, isn't that wasting water? They might have questions, and maybe they don't understand completely, everything about the pool and what goes into taking care of the pool. And so one thing I would recommend to all pros, and I know we're getting in the busy season, but if you have time, you can go to California Pool Spa Association, CPSA website. They have a drought toolkit, and they have lots of good information there that you can give to your customers that talk about how pools actually conserve water more than they waste it. And one of the things they have on there is talking about how basically if you have a backyard pool, as opposed to having the lawn and bushes and trees in your backyard, you're actually saving more water. You're conserving more water by having that swimming pool in your backyard than having a lawn and bushes and trees. And you're actually probably saving about, depending on the size of the pool and the particular area of the backyard, you can be saving up to 12,000 to even 30,000 gallons of water a year, as compared to having to have a lawn that's going to be needed taken care of and watered. So I think that's a big one right there. If you just think about that.
The last drought we had here, it was a few years ago. The state was giving everyone $100 to go buy like a solar blanket for their pool to cover it. Now, as a pool pro, we all hate those things. They're messy.
Yes.
They're hard to manage with a pool with the cover, and the customer wants you to take it off and put it on, and there's rules you have to establish with that. But those covers actually, if you do get into a severe drought time, even though we don't like it, those covers actually do conserve water.
They do. And I know I've heard some statistics. I'm not sure how correct they are, where certain covers, I'm not sure if it's the solar covers, but certain covers can actually reduce almost up to about 90% of evaporation.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, evaporation is I mean, you've got the atmosphere literally taking water out of your pool. And, obviously, if the pool goes down a few inches, a couple, 2, 3 inches a week from evaporation, and you've got to top that off more so, then that is a situation. The concern I have, especially in California or any places where you've got a lot of sun with those solar covers, particularly in season, is they're kind of, I guess there's the yin and the yang of that. You're conserving water, but those solar covers are designed to heat your water up too. And when it's hot, and if you have a solar cover on, man, your water is going to really get hot. And that can lead to consumption of your chlorine, and that can actually lead to algae growth as well. So I think the covers what would serve somebody better would just be more of like a solid cover or a blanket, as opposed to the bubble types, just for the sake of conserving water.
Mm-hmm. What about those liquid pool covers that you see, the chemical product?
As it turns out, I worked for a company that produced that product for a while, and I think those have their place. They're beneficial. Again, there's data, and I'm not sure exactly how correct the data is, but some data says that some of those products can reduce evaporation by 70%. I've been involved in actual testing of pools with that, and I never saw the 70%. It was more in the area of 30% was the greatest we could get. Sometimes it was as low as 12%. Again, everything you got to take with a grain of salt, right? And the one thing about those products is, again, they will consume chlorine as well. And so in the summertime, we need chlorine. And we don't need something that's going to create more chlorine demand. The other thing is, if you use anything like enzymes or polymer-based clarifiers, they will remove that product pretty immediately from there. So there's things you need to be aware of. Everything you need to be aware of. What all is involved.
And I think the biggest concern is keeping the water to a certain way to prevent the need to drain the entire pool. And we can kind of pin this on trichlor use and cyanuric acid, because with that, you're going to always be draining the pool down. And I think one thing that's a big misconception, and there was this big push for this during the drought a few years ago, educating people on the fact that, hey, you don't want to drain your pool, so here's things you can do to make sure the water is not going to need to be drained. And I think that went away to the wayside when the drought went away for a while.
Sure, but it's always going to come back. I can guarantee you probably this summer it'll come back again at some point, somewhere. I think, we're kind of living in this day and age now where we just need to realize everything we have around us is more precious. And I think we have to realize that in this world we're in now, we have to be good stewards. I think that's a good word. We need to be stewards of everything we use. And then the pool industry overall, I'm going to commend the pool industry because I think they've done a lot to promote conservation overall. But sometimes we can get a little maybe lazy or forgetful or in a hurry. We don't necessarily think of that. But I pretty much believe that if we respect and kind of understand that we're working with a natural resource that can become limited, and it's a very vital resource for the survival of humanity. And if we look around and kind of see that, there's things going on, I think we're going to talk about AI later, so maybe I'll bring that up with AI when we talk about AI. Just how much water use there is, for AI usage, lots of other things. And I think in the pool industry, we do a pretty good job of conservation. But something else I did want to bring up We talked about covers, and covers are, again, they're a hassle, but they can save. The other thing a lot of times we don't think about or realize is making sure we don't have leaks in the pool. That's probably something else to where if it seems like there's an unusual amount of water leaving, doing the bucket test, doing something to determine if your pool's losing water and you've got a leak and dealing with that. I think that's pretty vital and important. And then the other thing I always talk about is, and it's interesting because there's kind of a misnomer when droughts were declared. I would have a lot of pool pros contact me and ask me about backwashing, or ask me about, if I need to drain a foot or two out of my pool. Well, now I can't do that. Well, I checked the regulations, and there has never been, and I've never seen in any of the drought restrictions where you were restricted from doing maintenance, dilution, and draining. In other words, a small amount of draining. The restriction usually is the drought restrictions most of the time are on building new pools and completely filling of new pools. That is primarily what they'll go after in a drought. They'll say, hey, we're going to put a ban on building the pools, which I know the builders hate that. We don't want a mass amount of water getting put into a hole in somebody's backyard right now during a drought. And so the other thing they will forbid, or you really have to check into, is complete draining of a pool and refilling. That's what they want to avoid. I advise and I recommend, look, you're not breaking any kind of drought law if you have to backwash your pool. You're not breaking any kind of drought law if you need to drain down a foot or two and top that up to dilute it. In fact, you're doing a better job at conserving water by doing that. Because when you backwash, or when you do a little bit of draining a foot or two down to top it off and put fresher water in, when you backwash, you're removing total dissolved solids. You're removing cyanuric acid. You're removing calcium, hardness. You're lowering hardness. You're removing phosphates. You're removing nitrates. You're removing chloramines, combined chlorine. So you're getting rid of a lot of detrimental things and bringing fresh water back in that are going to ensure that water stays fresher longer. Because if you're not doing that, or you cease from doing that, then all those things are going to build up. And if you get to a point where your total dissolved solids are so high that you've scaled out a pool, or you just got problems to where now you have to drain that entire pool, and that's a water waster. So I'm a big proponent of proactive drain and dilute continuously as a maintenance standpoint, and I think that's probably one of the best ways to conserve water in a pool.
Yeah, I agree. And when they had the restrictions here, I remember in Los Angeles County, the way it worked was you couldn't water your lawn certain days of the week, and you had to use less water than you used the previous year, which is not a super bad restriction for a homeowner. It wasn't like anything that was going to stop you from filling your pool up. So I think the misconception is, like you said, that it's going to affect the pool pro. It doesn't really. The builders are affected. In fact, I believe there was a bill that was going to be put forward in the last drought to limit the size of pools being built. They only wanted pools a certain size because of the water usage. So for pool
that has
pros,
been done in Las Vegas.
Okay.
They've actually, there is now a code that pools, I can't remember exactly the sizing, but there is a restriction to pool sizes in Las Vegas, at least.
That's interesting. And if you're looking for the other parts of the podcast, the easiest way to get those, of course, is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Every Monday through Friday, I post a new episode there. You can also find episodes on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, there's a podcast icon. Click on that, and there'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,700 podcasts for you there. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.